Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 11, Episode 128. I'm Dave Bryan from SteelersDepot.com, and sitting in for my co-host Alex Kozora, who is vacationing in the Florida Keys this week. Two people sitting in today for Alex Kozora, both site contributors on SteelersDepot.com. You probably will recognize the names and the voices. If not, we'll get them to reintroduce themselves to you. I am talking about Josh Carney and Owen Straley. Gentlemen, good morning. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Terrible Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Dave. Surely appreciate it. I think the last time Owen and I chatted was a couple weeks ago on the roundtable we did. So good to see Owen here as well.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Definitely good to be back, Dave. And missing Alex today, but we'll try to hold it for him.
Yeah, well, it'll be a settle for podcast probably. No, not. I'm just joking there. Let's for people who may not be familiar with the both of you, Josh, I think you've been with us the longest on Steelers Depot. Why don't you give a quick rundown of how long you've been on the site, how I came about coming across you, and other than being me when you grow up, what else would you like to be?
So I'm coming up on my 7th season. I just completed my 6th draft with you guys. Yeah, you came across me when I first moved to Colorado. John Ledyard was writing for the site, and he and Alex are good friends. And John had recommended me for the site, and you and I chatted over the phone one day and kind of went from there. And it's just been a blast. I mean, I was a Steelers Depot reader all through college, listened to the podcast as much as I could, and thought one day I want to write for that site. When I grow up, I feel old already. I'm closing in on 30. I don't know. I mean, hopefully continue what I'm doing here with Steelers Depot and hopefully get into a credentialed position where I'm at games and really mingling with the other large media types. So, yeah.
All right, and you just moved back to
Yes.
the Pittsburgh area as well, too, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah, so I moved from Western Colorado back to the Pittsburgh area. I'm going to be a high school sports reporter with the Beaver County Times. So that'll be just northwest of Pittsburgh. So excited to get back into Western PA covering high school sports, especially high school football in this hotbed. So it'll be a lot of fun. Happy to be back here in the Steel City. So.
All right, glad to have you, and obviously not your first time on the podcast, and the same goes for Owen as well too. Boy, I have this knack of finding these young superstars, man. I don't know how I do it, but I do it. I did it with Alex, I did it with Matthew Marksey. I've done it with obviously several on the site there. Another one that's been with me, I think for a year or thereabouts. Owen Straley. Owen, my memory sucks as a 50-something-year-old guy. So, how did I come across you? How long you been with the site? And I believe people can't say, well, he doesn't play football. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, so ahead of last spring, right ahead of the draft, my football season actually got canceled. I play up at Bates College in Lewiston, Maine. I'll be a senior this year. And so when my season got canceled, I kind of just kept emailing you guys like, hey, I can do this, I can do that. And the repeated answer I kept getting back was, oh, well, if you don't have much availability in the season, like it's going to be tough for you to work for us. So then when my season finally got canceled, I just hit you guys up again and was like, hey, well, now I can work in the season. So ended up doing some draft reports for you guys then. And then this fall moved more into defensive back specific content, which I would consider to be my specialty, considering that I play cornerback. So similar to Josh, though, I probably from the time I was about 14 was reading the site and listening to the podcast. So it was always kind of like a dream of mine as I got older to contribute in like any way I could. And I've definitely appreciated over the past year, like all the opportunities you guys have provided me. And I hope people enjoy the content that I provide at a more specific defensive back centered point of analysis.
Absolutely, we do. And boy, if it was up to me, you'd post more. I mean, it's just that good out there. Just blessed to have both of you, and look forward to continued contributions on the site there. All right, so with that let's kind of jump into some topics here. By the way, give your what would your combine measurables be, Owen?
I've only ever tested my 40 and straight vertical up in the air. So 40 would be a 4.58, and my straight up and down vertical was a 37 last time I tested it.
And what's height, weight?
Yeah, that's where I get held up, about 5'8", 160 pounds.
All right. I think I could probably take you.
Oh, and the key is to just fabricate a little bit. I run a 4.38. I've got a 42-inch vert. I'm 6'1".
Yeah.
We got to add 2 inches to you, like Kendrick Green has done. Either that or that Permane Brothers is that good. It put 2 inches on him already there. So, all right, let's jump into some a few topics here, and really kind of newsy topics. I think to start with, the Steelers training camp schedule finally came out on Thursday. There, boy, it was good to see that, and not only that, 12 practices will be, or at least 12 scheduled practices for training camp at Heinz Field that'll be open to the public. People that if you're fans of the team or looking to attend that, you're gonna have to make sure you jump on Steelers.com, follow the links there on the site, because you have to have tickets. Even though the tickets are free, you have to have sign up for tickets that way and on. I think they're mobile digital tickets, all that new technology in that way there. So definitely glad to see that. I know Alex is working hard on trying to get some tickets secured for that. Once again, I think the practices start the first one July 28th, which I believe that's a Wednesday, and then once again 12 total practices I think scheduled for training camp that'll be open for the public there, and barring something unforeseen, I think we're planning on having Alex there for all 12 of them. Josh, you're back in the Pittsburgh area now. Are you going to be able to maybe score a few tickets there and meet up with Alex out there?
Yeah, I'm certainly going to try. Just looking at the schedule, I mean, 1:30 right in the middle of the day, that's pretty interesting. That'll be nice for downtown, those businesses and all that. I certainly feel for Latrobe not getting it again this year, but schedule looks pretty solid. Just 1:30 throughout the day, open to the public. I'm curious though, they didn't list a cap on how many people can come in. Could we see 50, 60,000 at training camp? I doubt it, but there's no cap on that. So that's interesting to see that tickets are free and it's going to be at Heinz Field. So plenty of seating, but I definitely plan on sitting next to Alex and kind of picking his brain on what he looks for in training camp.
Yeah, it says, I think, a limited amount. Now, I don't know what the limited amount is.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, with it not being out at Latrobe, and with it being in the middle of the day, and like you said, look, I expect attendance to be strong, especially during the first part of training camp there, but due to COVID and fallout still and stuff related to that, I imagine that fans are not going to be able to get close to players or anything along those lines. And obviously the draw of getting out there to training camp at St. Vincent College is being right there and being able to get autographs and all like that. So I wonder how that might damper it. Overall, obviously, once again, I think the push early, I think you'll see the crowds out. I'm not sure you're going to see 50,000 out there, no. Or do I think Heinz Field wants to have to deal with that many people out there? But I would think, man, at least a good 10 to 12,000. I don't know. I obviously have never been to a training camp practice for the Steelers that way and all. So within that, with and look, it was 4 weeks from if you can believe it, 4 weeks from yesterday, first preseason game, the Hall of Fame game, Steelers against the Cowboys. I know I can't wait to dive into not only that game but the tape afterward. I know you guys are the same there. When you think about training camp, each of you, when you think about training camp opening up 4 week or at the end of this month, which is obviously less than 4 weeks away. What is the first thing that kind of comes to your mind? Maybe player you're interested in seeing, or storyline along those lines. Josh, we'll start with you.
It's always backs on backers for me. Like, I've always looked forward to that. I want to see what Buddy Johnson looks like in those drills. See if he can get after the passer. It's all, that's what training camp is to me. It's just, teammates going at each other in padded practices. The one player I want to see, though, and I'm sure this guy's on Owen's radar as well, is I want to see James Pierre just in a greater role. I want to see how he looks against the number ones when teams go at each other. I just want to see him take that next step. But when it comes to training camp kicking off, obviously there's the excitement, there's the hope of all 32 teams. Like, this is our year. But I look forward to backs on backers, and I can't wait to see what day that's going to happen. I want to make sure I'm there for that, and I hope that there's plenty of video clips available that I could go back through and kind of break down. But that's the drill that I look forward to.
Owen, you're out there in, I think, Maine, right? By the way, I'm gonna have you send some of that lot. I am missing the boat here, literally. I think I gotta have Owen overnight me some Maine lobster. I think there. Owen, what are you looking forward to when it comes to training camp? What's the first thing that kind of pops in your head there?
Yeah, I think Josh touched on it briefly, but really not only James Pierre, but Shakur Brown, Trey Norwood, and Arthur Millette, the whole host of players who I think are going to compete for that sub-package role. And remembering back to prior to the 2019 season when they really figured out that dime position, it was years of Morgan Burnett and just really struggling to figure out that dime guy. And it leaves the defense so much less multiple in what they can do on third down and how they're going to attack. So I think Pierre and Brown are really the first two I'm looking at, but I'm really interested to see who distinguishes themselves in 7-on-7s and camp drills in terms of becoming that dime defender. And then also really who's going to play the nickel on third downs too, because it could be Cam Sutton, could be Shakur Brown, who I touched on. So I think there's a lot of talent, but a lot of confusion at the cornerback position right now, specifically in regards to sub-package football.
Absolutely, and we'll all be keyed in on the Alex Kozora post-practice reports, and get back to doing these post-practice, kind of 30-minute podcast episodes as well too. There. By the way, I forgot to tease it at the top of the show. There, Joel Corey. Today is Joel Corey Day. You can imagine how excited I am, fellas. CBA nut and contract nut like I am. Joel Corey, who has been on the Terrible Podcast before, feature writer on CBSSports.com, former NFL agent, salary cap expert, CBA expert, all those things there. Has a podcast as well too, which we'll be promoting there. So today is Joel Corey Day, so don't miss the back end of this show where I'm going to have a one-on-one conversation with Joel Corey and cover as many topics as I possibly can, I think, in about a 20-minute span there. So definitely interested or want to make sure I tease that out there at the top of the show there. All right, training camp, we talked about that. Moving on, we got a little bit of other kind of exciting news earlier this week. The East-West Shrine game, or East-West Shrine Bowl, whatever you want to call it these days. Obviously, that did not take place last year due to COVID, and for eons, as long as I can remember even growing up, man, the East-West Shrine game has been played down in South Florida, down in St. Petersburg area there. Well, lo and behold, it's getting moved out to out where I am out here in Las Vegas. Going to be held at Allegiant Stadium. Unfortunately, it's going to be the week of the Pro Bowl, but unfortunately, it's going to kind of coincide, I think, with the Senior Bowl week of practices as well too. They do have them kind of a little staggered there, but it's definitely going to make it tough on people to get to both of them. Have no fear, Steelers Depot is here, because we're going to be hopefully sending at least two people from the site to each of them. And Josh, I think you quickly volunteered your hand to to come out here to Las Vegas. Have you gotten permission from the boss? With I think you got 2 kids there.
Yep.
Have you got all the requisition forms filled out to make that happen?
I have not gotten the requisition forms filled out, but
Ah.
I've gotten the verbal okay, which should count for
No,
us men.
you haven't been married long
No,
enough then.
yeah,
No.
you're right. We just celebrated our 3rd anniversary on July 5th, so not long enough. But no, I did get the verbal okay, and I've looked into some flights, and I really just want to see the East-West Shrine Bowl, see how they do things. I think Eric Galco is the director. He does a great job. I follow along on Twitter each year. But having it in Vegas and having that type of spotlight is going to be massive for that. I don't like that it's competing with the Senior Bowl. That's tough. But, having it in a place like Vegas, and especially at Allegiant Stadium, like that's going to do wonders for those guys in that bowl game. And I hope to get out there, see the Steelers Depot Metroplex, and maybe get a tour of the city in the off hours from Dave. So
yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm really excited here, and before we move forward, though, I'm going to have a written note from the wife. I think I'm pretty sure because I don't want to get in any trouble that way. But no, in all seriousness, I think Josh will be at least one person we send out there. I haven't really checked with Owen. I know Owen's might have some commitments and all like that, but Owen. Obviously the invitation will be for you to either go out, come out to Las Vegas or go to Mobile. I'm not sure if even Alex will go down to Mobile now. It makes it kind of, obviously if he can, he will. If not, we'll have a couple of you guys down there as well. So, Owen, any early thoughts about that? I know it's a little bit way early on that, though, as far as schedule goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm still going to be a senior at college next year, but I mean, for a trip to Mobile to experience that, I think I could definitely work on taking a week off.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely move in that direction. Go ahead, Josh.
No, I think it'd be great for Owen just to kind of get that experience. And hey, you're a college senior. The work has been done, sir.
Yeah.
All right.
Owen, when does your season start?
Kicks off September 15th against Amherst College.
Okay. All right. Good deal.
At home.
Good deal.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. We talked about training camp. We talked about the East-West game. And we hit on this, I think, a little bit the other day here. Devin Bush has had an uptick in social media activity, Twitter specific. It looks like it's kind of died off a little bit than what it was. Is this just Devin Bush being bored? Is this Devin Bush? Is there more to the issue here? Is this something? I mean, look, he made the New York Post, and not in a great way there. Is too much attention being put on this, or is there something going on here? And speculation only. Look, and he claims that he's been fined. I don't know if that's been fined by the team, if it's been kind of fined by his teammates, friendly position group, kind of swear jar type situation there. But to me, it is a little bit of concerning because, I mean, this is a guy that's the quarterback of your defense that, a 3rd year with the team, you're really expecting this guy to kind of grow into that or make a giant leap forward this year into, I mean, lack of a better word, defensive captain, obviously not this year, but, a year or two down the line, you could potentially see that happen here. How concerning is this overall, and is this going to be even something that we're talking about here maybe 2 weeks into training camp? Whichever one wants to jump in first.
I mean, I did the terrible take on it on Monday that it's tiresome seeing the Steelers in the news consistently for social media usage. I have no problem with players having Twitter or TikTok, but don't make yourself the news. And this is bizarre behavior from Devin Bush. Like I went back through and just kind of scrolled his Twitter feed prior to this last 2 weeks, his usage on Twitter, and never really saw anything like this from Bush. I hope it's just boredom, Dave. I really do. But man, I think Zach Banner spoke for us all when he put out that tweet. It was like, the next time you land in Pittsburgh, I'm taking your phone. It's certainly concerning. He's just very random on Twitter. I saw someone say it was like someone took his diary and started tweeting out every line from it. And that's kind of what it seems like. But yeah, it's very tiresome to see this group, especially these young stars, in the news for the wrong reasons. And it's not anything criminal or anything like that, but it's social media usage again, and it just continues to feed into that narrative that these guys can't stay out of their own way on social media. And I think there's a larger discussion there for the Steelers in general, but it is bizarre behavior from Devin Bush. But I'm pretty removed from the social media aspect of a younger person, so Owen could probably fill in there a little bit better.
Owen?
Yeah. So I saw some people kind of commenting on Twitter about how maybe he might have been like almost doing it for the attention to kind of prove a point of like people overanalyze like what they're reading on somebody's Twitter or something. So I think
that's totally possible. I mean, these guys get bored. They probably want to see how they can make the make the media jump and just to prove a point. But do you want to go maybe as far as what he's gone? I mean, it's very bizarre and out of the blue. I mean, if he's just trying to do some sort of social study or whatnot, I mean, okay, but for it to kind of run as many kind of days and it's kind of the things that he's tweeted, and I don't know. Carry on, Owen.
Yeah, no, it's definitely strange. I try to like hold back from being too like crazy about it because I'm really excited about Devin Bush coming back. Like, the defense missed him a lot last year. I think specifically in terms of being able to be multiple, play man coverage, have a Tampa 2 backer. Like, he really fills a lot of the needs that they have, and it's pretty reminiscent of like what Devin White did down in Tampa this fall. So I'm hoping that it's not a sign of things to come. I'm hoping it's just a little him venting some steam on Twitter. But I think, kind of like you guys have touched on, it's really tough to tell until he comes to camp. And I could really see it going either way. Maybe he comes to camp and it causes an issue. More than likely, I think not. I don't know. I think I agree more to the aspect of it's frustrating that there's not a like understanding among the team that social media is one thing. I think almost every team has a social media presence, but with the Steelers, it just feels a little out of control and it feels like too much. There's some people on the team saying, oh, maybe he shouldn't have said that, or hey, maybe you shouldn't have done this on social media. And it's like, I just think those conversations should kind of come and the expectation should be set in the locker room before it even gets to that point. So that overall, that's probably the most frustrating part to me.
I think with the Steelers, it comes to the point, like, why is it always you? Like, they're in the news for social media, whether it's Juju on TikTok or Chase Claypool saying something in an interview on Twitch. Why is it always this team? And I think that's the most frustrating part. Like, I have no issue with guys trying to build a brand or whatever post football, but like I said at the end of the terrible take, like, at some point it has to be about football with this group. And we've seen a number of issues or a number of examples over the last few years that it's not always about football. There's social media involved, and I get that they're humans, they have lives away from the field, but it's definitely frustrating, not only as a fan but as an analyst, to constantly be writing or talking about, well, this is what this person did on TikTok, or this is what this person said on Twitter. Yeah, I had one person in my mentions the other day kind of comparing what Bush is doing to what made Vince Williams so popular on Twitter. Vince Williams really spoke his mind. Mm-hmm. I don't think he ever went this outlandish or bizarre. I may be wrong, but I am concerned with Bush because, like Dave said earlier, this is completely out of the blue. Like, he didn't do this his rookie year or last year or at any point during his time in Michigan. So it's concerning, and I just truly hope it's boredom at this point.
Mm-hmm. Overall, look, I think players nowadays, and it, it's kind of foreign to me to start, especially my age now. Now, granted, I've been on social media since I don't know 2008. I mean, when they bury me, they better put the phone in there so I can keep up with Twitter, because that's how addictive it is. That's Twitter has kind of implanted itself in my life. Facebook, I don't really give a hoot too much about Facebook. I will follow, I obviously follow stuff on Instagram, but man, I take my Twitter away from me, and I'm kind of lost there. But within that, I think it's okay for these guys to build their brands and whatnot. I think they should, man, because you don't know how long your NFL career is going to be, so you better strike while the iron's hot. On the flip side, though, and I do understand that not everybody can be Larry Fitzgerald either. Those kind of people have personalities. It is fun to kind of see the certain personalities come out on social media. Now, here's the funny thing about it here is probably a good portion of the people that might listen to this podcast aren't, even if they have a Twitter account, they're not on Twitter, as often as maybe the three of us are there. So, and then I do get some responses on Twitter says, man, why do you even retweet some of that stuff and pay attention to that? Nobody cares about that. Well, our job, or as a site and kind of collectively, is kind of to follow this stuff, and if if it becomes a story, we didn't make it a story. The player makes it a story. I mean, if we're not talking about it, somebody else is. Those kind of things there. So I think it's kind of our duty to kind of talk about this. But on the flip side, it's not to go over the top, and I'm kind of now because we waited a long. I think Matthew Marksey was waited a good 72 hours there, or if not longer, before we posted the first kind of story on the site about Devin Bush and his social media activity, because you didn't know if he was hacked and those kind of things there. But I mean, it's hard to ignore it at this point. And I think the biggest thing right now with training camp 3 weeks away from starting, somebody's going to ask him about this, you would think. I mean, I don't know, if it's going to be open locker room, or they're going to have to continue to do the Zooms yet, though. Excuse me, along those lines there. But at some point, I think he's going to have to answer to the media in a more public surrounding about what is kind of transpiring with him right now.
Yeah, and for Bush's sake, I hope it stops soon. Whether it's today, tomorrow. At some point, he has to flip that switch to being about football. But you're absolutely right. Someone will be the person to ask him about it 3 weeks from now. And it'd be a story all over again, whether Devin Bush says, no comment, I'm not going to answer questions about that, or whatever it may be. It's just going to continue to stay in a news cycle. And that's the unfortunate part, because I don't think most players understand that at this point. It's like anything you do or say, it will be in the news. So that's kind of the situation he's created for not only himself, but his teammates and the franchise.
All right. Any final thoughts, Owen?
No, I mean, not too much. I just I agree with Josh on it, and just kind of more back to the point. I just think there's too many like good players in this organization where it seems to be like there's just no conversation behind the scenes. I remember with Martavis Bryant when they drafted Sammy Coates. That's not my replacement. It's just it's just, or even this one where it's like, I don't know. And again, I think there's a possibility that he might have contacted Juju and been like, hey, this is a joke, like, check this out. But there's also a good possibility that that's not the case. And then Juju's sitting behind his phone like, what the hell's this guy talking about? So I don't know. I mean, I hope it's not an issue, but I do agree he has to be prepared for them to ask the questions, because I mean, it's the media. Like, they're going to be looking for clicks. They're looking for stuff that's going to sell. So, I mean, like you said, it's been in the Washington Post. It's something that is now a story, and he's going to have to kind of deal with the follow-up from it. So.
Yeah. Let's see. Definitely when it comes to depth, boy, they need, if there's one guy that they have to have back in this defense this year and quarterback in that thing, I mean, it's him. I mean, you're talking about, Look, they obviously have a lot of returning players. The Cam Haywards, the Stephon Tuitt's, obviously the Joe Haynes, Minka, T.J. Watt. A lot of big pieces on that defense. But man, if they don't have that center cog in there, in Devin Bush kind of picking up where he left off in Week 6 when he had that knee injury, this thing I think can go south. You got to have that guy back on the field. He's got to take that jump this year. So I think we've probably reached the rolling the eyes portion of talking about Devin Bush. So let me kind of do my best job of playing Alex Kozora here and moving this thing forward here. Mike Tannenbaum, former front office guy of the Jets and the Miami Dolphins. You want to talk about creating stir on major media outlets? They know how to do it. The Adam Shines, the Mike Tannenbaums. The list probably doesn't stop there, but they know how to get reactions on some of these talk shows. Mike Tannenbaum was on ESPN's Get Up yesterday morning. Says Ben, the Steelers are in bad shape with Ben Roethlisberger this year. He expects Ben to, in so many words, to be benched by the middle of the season. He goes on to kind of say, look, the biggest thing here would be, there are ways that he could criticize Ben, which I get. I've written a lot of the same things, questions about that face Ben Roethlisberger heading into this season based on last season, the whole depth of target, being able to push the football down the field. Offensive line obviously plays a big role in that. But for Tannenbaum to come in, it felt a little strong, and I even had a little quick back and forth with him on the Twitter machine myself yesterday there. But how bad does it have? Look, I understand the sensationalism part of it, and boy, it certainly did make the rounds and get the show some views along on that. But how bad would it have to get for Ben Roethlisberger to actually be benched midway through the season?
His right arm would have to completely fall off. They're not benching him.
And then it would be injury related, but
right. Yeah, he will never be benched for play. I struggle to remember if he was ever benched in his career. Probably the early years with Cowher, based on play, but I'm struggling to recall even a time where he may have been pulled from a game. But I watched that live yesterday morning. I get up every morning and I, no pun intended, put on Get Up, and I wish I could have taken a screenshot of Dan Orlovsky's face.
Oh yeah, he was just rolling his eyes, and yeah.
It was a horrible morning segment from Tannenbaum. Prior to the Roethlisberger hot take, he mentioned he wouldn't pay Baker Mayfield if he were the Browns because Mayfield's the 6th best quarterback in the AFC. That's some sort of slight. Tannenbaum has had it out for Roethlisberger the last few years. I don't want to be super critical, but the guy it feels like he's on there just for the hot takes. And then the guys around him, like an Orlovsky, they have to try and put out the fire with actual facts. But with Roethlisberger, it's not physical at this point. I think Orlovsky kind of pointed it out too in his response. He still has, not the great arm he once had, but his arm is still capable. He
had the third most pass attempts of 20 or more yards down the field. Now, if you want to get into completion percentage, we can talk a little bit about that, but he still kind of is who he has been in that category. Yeah, you'd like to see that aspect of it, but it's not like he can't. It's not like he can't throw the ball. 45 yards down the field.
Yeah, he's not late career Peyton Manning where it's literally physical limitations. Tannenbaum highlighted the poor offensive line in front of Roethlisberger and the lack of targets past 5 yards. A lot of that was the offensive line and the lack of an offensive identity in terms of scheme. Roethlisberger would honestly, I don't even know, 20 interceptions in the first 8 weeks with very low touchdown numbers to even be considered for benching. But ESPN's got to do something. They continue to lose credibility day after day, having guys go on air and just spew these hot takes just for clicks. I mean, I get it. That's what you have to do in today's media. That's how you have to garner attention. But I mean, that guy's a former 2-time general manager. You know, he was the general manager with the Jets and the Dolphins, and it's frustrating to listen to a guy of that stature with that background go on air and say something like that.
It's okay to be. I mean, look. I mean, we're not done probably being critical of the season possibly ahead for Roethlisberger. And look, is there a chance that maybe statistically speaking, that depending on what metric you want to use, that Roethlisberger winds up fourth in the AFC North? I mean. Look, I mean, a lot of people. Joe Burrow is still young. I think Joe Burrow still maybe has an upside to him down the line that will eventually come out. But in short, in the limited time that Joe Burrow played last season, he wasn't great. You look at his adjusted net yards per passing attempt. You look at his completion percentage of balls of 20 more yards down the field was absolutely horrible. I mean, there's even looking at the style of play Ben Roethlisberger had last year. Okay, if you want to rank him behind Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield right now, okay, I get it. But I mean, I got to see more from Joe Burrow. I got to see a huge step from Joe Burrow in 2021 before I say, Ben Roethlisberger is fourth in the AFC North. With Owen, what is one of the biggest question marks that you would like to, that you have about Ben Roethlisberger heading into 2021?
I guess not necessarily a question mark, but really Josh touched on the limitations. I agree. I don't think there's huge arm limitations to what Ben's doing now versus what, I mean, sure, maybe the arm talent's not what it was in 2004, 2005, but I think the bigger issue, and especially behind an O-line that's replacing like 4 starters, is the complete lack of mobility. So you have to scheme around that, and I think that's where I expect Canada to hopefully come in. I mean, we talk about it a lot. Ben doesn't seem to love the under center work, but find ways to get him some under center work, find ways to get him some pistol work. I don't know about rollouts because he's not necessarily, like we just talked about, athletic enough for that to be rolling out too heavy. But I think you gotta scheme him easy targets, find ways to get him in rhythm. And I think I watched a lot of Canada tape. You see a lot of that with the way he'll use his H-backs, whether it's coming across the formation, getting them out, like slipping them out on a wheel, just find ways to create easy completions and easy yardage for Ben Roethlisberger. I think there was an article about it a couple of days ago. I think it's an interesting point. I mean, we talked so much last year about how Derek Watt was basically, like a decoy in the offense last year. And I think, especially looking at Canada and Pitt, Canada at LSU, the fullback has always been a big part of his offense, really more primarily used as an H-back. So I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that goes in the Pittsburgh offense. And then just one last point. I think Josh made it, but just like ESPN, I remember growing up as a kid, I used to wake up and you'd watch it, and Stuart Scott and Kenny Mayne, and like, it was credible.
Oh, boy, Dan Patrick, Keith Overman, boy, you could not wait until SportsCenter came on at night,
Yep.
or like the 5, I forget what time it was and all like that. I mean, that was must-see TV because, A, those guys were entertaining, and obviously it was more of, I guess, a highlight show and talking, it was less kind of conversation, hot take, but I mean, that's the world that we live in now is – the Stephen A. Smiths, who's the other one? Who's his partner in crime, or was his partner in crime?
Skip Bayless.
Yeah, Skip Bayless and Adam Shine. I mean, if you line these guys up, the Skip Bayless and the Adam Shines and stuff like that, and you really grilled those guys on X's and O's and depth of rosters, they wouldn't stand a prayer. But because they can deliver things in kind of a hot take manner, those guys, I mean, it just goes to show you, man, you can get paid to do pretty much anything because their overall depth of sports knowledge past the initial layer is just, I mean, it's not there, you know. But I mean, they can create controversy, and that's it, man. Advertising makes the world go round, brother. I mean.
Yep. I don't even quite remember if Tannenbaum gave a legit answer as to why he thought Roethlisberger would get benched.
He kept pointing back to average yards per attempt. Now,
and he kept highlighting the offensive line too. That was the other thing.
Right. He said you put him behind the Colts. I think he said Colt offensive line, and maybe you get another year out of him and all like that. Look, here's the thing. I have no problem talking about advanced metrics. Okay. The better way for him to have framed that, in my opinion, would have been, look, if Roethlisberger has a adjusted net yards per passing attempt number of under 6.7, the Steelers are going to have an amazingly tough time at winning a large amount of games. And I do believe that with this schedule. I don't think Ben can post a 6.27, 6.47, whatever adjusted net yards per passing attempt number this season, no matter how good the running game is. And with this schedule and this team have success, I think that number's got to get a lot closer to 7 this year for that to happen. Just throwing out a loose yards per attempt number, I think that's too vague. I think you got to drill that down a little bit. And then, look, I get a lot of his argument, because you can't have Ben just throwing 5-yard slants, dumping off to the running back, or throwing 20 yards down the field. That's basically what he did last year. The short pass, the dump off, or I'm going deep. In my opinion, he would have made his argument a lot better and leave out the sensationalism of Ben being benched by the middle of the season. I don't think anybody buys that. But his argument would have been, look, we have to see would you both agree that we have to see Ben Roethlisberger be able to connect more on the 6 to 15 yards down the field area of the field this year? Plain and simple.
Yeah, he has to open things up for, additional throws underneath, the running game, everything. He's got to be able to hit those throws on a consistent basis just for the offense in general to thrive. You did ask the question, though, was there any one question mark with Roethlisberger this year that you needed to see answered? And you kind of touched on it, Dave, earlier. It was the deep ball accuracy. Like, I think if he hits those at a more respectable number, this narrative of him being washed up, his arm is shot, like, that will all go away quickly, because the tape shows that the arm is fine. Just the accuracy is off. But going back to it, that 6 to 15 yard window, if he can hit those consistently, it's going to open everything else up for this offense. And I think you'll see the offense in general return to a respectable level. And maybe Roethlisberger will get some of that respect back towards his name. I doubt it. But, I'm tired of the hot takey atmosphere. And you could just watch the people on that panel yesterday with Tannenbaum, just like, you've got to be kidding me. You just said that.
Here's the thing. I don't think he has to necessarily be, have the third most attempts of more than 20 yards down the field like he did last year. I mean, I think by him maybe potentially throwing a little bit more underneath from the 6 to 15 yard area, some of those, I don't know, 12-yard out routes and along those lines there. If he hits on a few more of those in lieu of those attempts, because look, it's not a high percentage throw to begin with when you throw the football more than 20 yards down the field. A lot of times and in Roethlisberger's case, he's doing it in cover one man situations where there's we don't see, in other words, we don't see Roethlisberger do too many of the cover two hole shots these days. He does it, but it's just, if he does do it, those usually aren't 20 yards variety anyway. Those are more in the 12 to 16, and maybe he does need to work a little bit more on those cover two shots. I think for Roethlisberger, and I think personally, I think Roethlisberger can still be the third best quarterback in the AFC North, and the Steelers still have success, if that makes sense. If you're able to run the ball successfully, if he's able to hit on some of those, if he doesn't turn the football over, obviously, and if he hits on a few more of those, 6 to 15-yard completions there in the game, maybe upticks his overall completion percentage. It doesn't have to be gigantic. A percentage and a half, on deep balls more than 20 yards down the field. I think that would suffice there. Make no mistake about it, though. I mean, it's okay to have questions about Roethlisberger in 2021, right? Owen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I think there definitely is. And actually, I think one of the biggest problems that I've had with Roethlisberger recently, I think you've touched upon it, is just falling in love so much with that 0-1 personnel, where that's where he always looks his best, when he can, spread the field, get those isolated matchups, quick game. But I think, the team has not finished better than 29th in raw running stats since, I think, 2018. They were dead last this past season. And if that doesn't get better,
right,
to a point where you're at least like middle of the pack in the league, you just really don't have a chance to be like a legitimate playoff threat. And then I think, kind of going back to Roethlisberger, we always talk about, like throwing like 68 times in a playoff game. He also threw like close to that number of attempts last time in the Jacksonville game. And my question that I would pose is that, like, is part of that a Ben Roethlisberger thing? Is part of that maybe him checking out of some run plays at the line? Is part of that maybe him being in his offensive coordinator's head all the time? Hey, we can really work the pass. Like, we don't need the run game this week. I don't know if that's the case. Maybe it's like a chicken or the egg type thing where he knows they can't run. He wants to get away from the run. But I think he's got to accept that this, especially at this stage of his career, this is going to have to be a somewhat like Najee Harris-led team for this to be where it needs to go. And then the last point I would make is people are really talking about, this O-line. And then the question I would pose there is, how much worse could the O-line be?
Yeah.
Like, you're replacing starters. They literally could not get an inch last year in every third and inches situation I watched. So at least in the run blocking department, you'd think it can't be worse.
Look, it might not look pretty, especially right out of the chute with this offensive line, and it might take a little while to gel, and it still might end up being, I don't know, the 20th ranked offensive line maybe in the NFL. But you drafted them back in the first round, that should help you at least overcome some of that. If you have a running game that's middle of the pack this year, let's say, I don't know, 15th overall in, I don't want to use yards per attempt. I hate archaic stats like that. But I mean, if you have a run success rate, maybe 50 to 51% as a whole, and that includes, having a strong first and 10 success rate there, man, that's going to change that offense drastically. And, a lot of if then this type scenarios when it comes to Ben Roethlisberger. I agree with you. If they don't have a run game of some sorts in this thing, it just is not going to work. You cannot expect Roethlisberger on a week in, week out basis to throw 30, 40 times a game. It's just, and you're right. There are certain times during the game where you wonder how much of it's the coordinator, how much of it's Roethlisberger saying, let's put that 0-1, personnel out there, which for those listening, that's all basically all wide receivers and a tight end, right? Or sometimes even zero, right? Where Roethlisberger will have all the wide receivers out there, no tight end, no running back there. You can't live on that because you take the run game element out of it completely. I understand end of half situation, end of game situations, and all like that, but make no mistake, if you're going to dice as this season goes on, if you're going to dissect Roethlisberger, it's got to be off of the success of the run game.
Yeah, and they have to. Owen kind of mentioned it earlier. Like, I want to see buy-in from Roethlisberger with this Canada system. Like, even if it's his last year, like, completely buy-in. It doesn't have to be a top 10 rushing attack at this point. It doesn't even have to be a top 10 offense. The one example I consistently come back to is that late era Peyton Manning, the 2015 Broncos. He was clearly not what he once was, and he just leaned on the run game. That run game wasn't great. It was 17th in the league, but they were able to do so much offensively. And you're right, Dave. You can't judge Roethlisberger this year without that run game. And if there's no run game, I mean, they're not going to be competing for the playoffs. But I think we're all in the same boat. Like, we have some optimism about the run game in general, just because the offensive line is rebuilt in a sense. Like, I know people say it looks terrible on paper, but part of a rebuild is you have inexperienced guys and unknowns. So we'll see. But yeah, you're right. You can't really judge Roethlisberger without that run game.
All right, let's move it along here. We talked a little bit at the top of the show, mentioned the name of James Pierre. There's a guy that we're looking forward to seeing the most, not only training camp, preseason, and who knows, maybe on into the start of the regular season there. Owen, you recently did a great another kind of film room session on James Pierre there. Quickly kind of recap that, if you will, for us, and give me kind of like the biggest plus that sticks out with James Pierre on the limited amount of tape that we've seen so far, and maybe one of the things that you're most concerned about when it comes to James Pierre.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, this fall especially, I was doing my defensive back film room, and I also would cover their special teams contributions. And early in the season, I really noticed this kid, James Pierre, just like killing it as a gunner. Like, he was forcing fair catches, making tackles, doing everything. He actually had some pretty good roles on kickoff too. So after a while, when Joe Hayden, Steven Nelson, Mike Hilton, various injuries in the secondary forced Justin Lane into the lineup, and he was kind of looking like a bit of a deer in the headlights out there, was struggling with zone coverage, I started calling for, let's see some James Pierre. And we finally saw him. And I mean, he looks smooth. Like, he's got really good hips, especially. It was one of the first things I noticed for a 6'1", 190-pound corner. Really good hips, and might be the most physical corner on the roster. Like, the guy really is not afraid to not only come up and stick somebody, but he's really good block shedder, is not scared at all to get involved. So I think those are all good things. And he has pretty good zone instincts too, from what I've seen. Had some good situations, communicating cover two, sinking, understanding that you want to force stuff underneath. I guess biggest problem, I mean, someone pointed it out in the comments. I thought it was a decent point. Just kind of his ability to, like, when he's in press, carries vertically well. But in terms of, like, throttling down with a comeback or a curl or something like that, I think that might be a little tough for him at the lankier size. But I'd say he's my favorite to start as the boundary corner with Sutton bumping into the nickel. I think the other option would be you keep Sutton on the outside and you put a guy like Shakir Brown in the nickel. But in my opinion, it's a lot tougher to replace Sutton's nickel dime roll than it is to replace, say, what he can give you on the boundary. And I think Pierre's shown that he should be able to survive on the boundary. It'll really come down to what we see in camp. But I think he's got a good work ethic, and you can just see it on film with some guys. Like, he really gives a what about it. Like, he'll stick his face in the fan. So I think he'll attack whatever role the team gives for him, and I think he's a big reason that they were okay with letting a guy like Steven Nelson walk.
You obviously watched, a pretty good deal Florida Atlantic tape with him as well too. If I asked you, man, Owen, what was the one maybe thing that you think led to James Pierre going undrafted, what would you say?
I think it's a lot. I mean, first, he only had one starting season as an outside corner. He was playing safety before they transferred him over. And then secondly, just not insane ball production. He did have 3 interceptions, but beyond that, he only had like 1 pass defense beyond that. So just not really like living around the football, I think. And then especially on his college tape, there was times where it feels like maybe instead of going for the breakup, he's kind of waiting to just get there and make a big hit at the point of attack. But looking at his NFL tape, he seems to have improved that. Like, I actually think in his limited NFL tape, his ball skills actually look a little better than they did in college. So I think there's definitely improvement there. I mean, he's training with Minka this summer, so I could see him having a big year, and I think he where he might not provide the extremely sticky man coverage that Steven Nelson did. And people really did not give Steven Nelson enough credit for how good he was in isolated man coverage in his time in Pittsburgh. But I think Pierre's going to be able to give you more turnover creation, be it forced fumbles, interceptions. I think he plays the ball better and more aggressively than Steven Nelson ever really did.
All right. For those that have not read that, make sure you search Owen out on SteelersDepot.com. Fantastic film room on that. And that's kind of Owen's specialty, the secondary. We'll be relying on Owen on some kind of coverage dissections that maybe stump us as the season goes on there. Deontay Johnson deemed the Steelers' best first-time Pro Bowl selection candidate for 2021 by Mark Sessler on NFL.com. I kind of get that as a big picture thing there. However, Common, when it comes to Pro Bowl and it kind of being a popularity contest, look, I think we all expect Deontay Johnson to kind of make that next step in his third season there. Who knows? Maybe he can hit 100 catches, 1,000 yards along those lines there. But true or false, Deontay Johnson will be a first-time Pro Bowler in 2021.
False. Yeah, I think with the way the offense is going, I think obviously the targets are going to still be there for him. I think he could do 100 catches, 1,000 yards, but he just consistently is lost in the shuffle of that popularity contest at receiver. And I think if there was one Steeler on the roster that could be a Pro Bowler for the first time, I think the easy answer would be Chase Claypool, just because of that popularity contest. He's a well-known brand at this point. He could have a bigger year if Roethlisberger can figure out some of the deep ball issues. But yeah, I don't know that I ever see Deontay being a Pro Bowler, and that's not a knock on him as a talent. We know how good he is here in Pittsburgh. I just can't see him being a Pro Bowler this year or at any point for a number of factors.
Owen?
I think the way a Matt Canada offense is designed, it's really more you're kind of scheming completions for the receivers rather than allowing the receivers to create on their own. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where a guy like Deontay Johnson, he's going to thrive in a system like last year where it's like, okay, go create on your own and we'll find you when you're open. Whereas I think Josh kind of touched on it, a guy like Claypool, like in these like play action and stuff, like Claypool's going to be the deep shot guy, I would assume. So I could see him having a big year. As far as where I'd like to see Deontay and Claypool both get involved, I want to see them get a lot of rushing attempts in this Canada offense. And I don't know how, you see a lot at the collegiate level. I don't know how much he'll actually implement that to the NFL level. But I just think, if, for example, like a guy like Ray McLeod, like if he comes in and he's in motion, I just don't think he's as much of a threat to say, you can go like play action rollout out of that or something. Right. Whereas I think Deontay Johnson gives you a really good kind of dual threat out of that role. So I think if Deontay's going to make a Pro Bowl, I think his role's got to change and he's got to become a little bit more of a yak guy in this offense, less of that possession move the sticks guy. But I did there was that Twitter like respond with your breakout candidate and all this stuff. I did have Deontay Johnson as my offensive player of the year. I like his running is so just as a defensive back and cornerback specifically. There's nothing I appreciate more than a guy who can separate off the line and create separation at the top of his routes. And if they schemed him right, I think he could definitely be one of the best receivers in the league. Obviously, got to work on those drop issues, but my biggest holdup with saying he'd be a Pro Bowler would definitely be his fit in a Matt Canada offense.
Yeah, and it's not I hope people aren't taking me as a slight against him. I think with the whole popularity, I think I'm with you. How he's used in potential in that offense. There's a chance that there's a good chance you see all three of those wide receivers maybe total right around 75 to 85 catches for right at, I don't know, 800 to 900 yards. You could really kind of map it out where all three of them possibly get that. And then if they do that, then you really don't really have one guy kind of sticking out there overall. And then that with the whole popularity contest, because fan votes a third of that. I think Claypool or Juju would win that over Deontay Johnson right now. And once again, it's not a slight against Deontay. I think he's primed to have, especially if he can get those drops under control. And man, nobody makes people miss more right after the catch than really Deontay Johnson does. So that's another feather in his cap where he adds a little bit of yak there. He's proved that he can get on. I'd like to see him take a little bit more shots with him down the field over the top this year. I think you're playing into one of his weaknesses there if you continually run those digs or those just those underneath kind of crossing routes there, because I don't think he's a big fan of running his face right into a linebacker or a middle of the field safety there. So a little bit less of that, a little bit more down the field. Rely on his route running a little bit more and his ability to separate. I think he'll be fine. I think Sessler missed a boat with the kind of a give me putt here. Man, I think because of the turnover in the NFL at the running back position, with popularity of first round draft picks, man, I would have thrown my money down on the table real quick. Najee Harris would be the team's first, had the best potential to be a first time Pro Bowler, and I said as much in my terrible take yesterday.
Yeah, there's obviously the concerns about what does the run game look like, but obviously they have invested so much in Najee Harris. They want to get the run game going again. You run that guy till the wheels fall off, and it's pretty. I don't want to say easy, but it's pretty easy to see Harris as that first Pro Bowler, just because of the position, the usage that's going to happen in this offense, and just the talent overall. Yeah, I do agree with you, Dave. I think Sessler did miss just a gimme 1 foot putt. It's Najee Harris, and if you don't want to go Najee Harris because you have concerns about the run game, it's probably should have been Chase Claypool. So.
Right. Look, I mean, I'm going to point to the fence right now, and I think three running backs go to the Pro Bowl every year. I bet they're all three Alabama guys. I bet it's Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, and Najee Harris there. That would be my bet there. All right, talking about running backs there, ESPN, I think another outlet or so, Benny Snell has kind of been chosen as the veteran cut candidate for the Steelers there. True or false? Benny Snell, or is he, the candidate to not make this team? Make me an argument why or why not.
Owen, are you leading why he will, or where are you at? Because
so yeah, I actually did see this. I was leaning more toward why he won't be cut, and my main reasoning was, I think a lot of people, for the same reason that a lot of people were saying he would, is he's got the similar skill set to Najee Harris, but he's more of like a plotter type, or like similar body type, I guess. And that's the kind of where I would look at it is, okay, well, Najee goes down. I think you sort of have to have insurance for that bigger back who's going to be able to push the pile in those situations when you need it. Granted, I think we've seen Benny Snell fail in a lot of those situations previously due to just lack of, pure vision and stuff like that as a runner. But I think so let's say you keep, Kalen Ballage or something like that. I think he's a good, decent back. He actually has been really good in short yardage situations, given he's not the most physical back on earth. But I just think part of me does want a guy like Benny where it's like, okay, well, if Najee goes down, I think you can still feed Benny like 25 to 30 times in a game, and he's going to get what he's going to get on those carries. He's probably going to average like 3.7 yards per carry. It's not going to be great, but like you can at least have him tote the rock 30 times a game. He's got the body to be able to handle it. He can theoretically push the pile in some situations like that, dish out some punishment. And I just don't know if besides Najee, you have another back on the roster who has that bell cow ability. Dave always talks about it. I think Najee and Benny are both the same in this way, where they kind of build as a game goes on, and they're like that back where you get them going, you got that lead in the fourth quarter, you can really grind a team out with them running the football. You saw some of it in 2019 with him when Connor was out. So I don't think he'll keep his short yardage role if he's on the team this season, because I think Najee's going to pretty much do everything as a back. But I think cutting Benny leaves you really out of like an insurance, for lack of a better word, for if Najee were to go down at a position where there's a lot of injuries.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with Owen. The only way I see Benny Snell not on the 53-man roster is if Colbert trades him for a late-round pick to kind of try and recoup some of that value he's lost in recent years with trades. You need someone similar in body type to Najee Harris, just like Owen said, in case Najee either breaks down or misses a few games with injury. You can't change your offense completely, and you're not going to ask Anthony McFarland to be Najee Harris or Kalen Ballage to be Najee Harris. The only other way I should say that I see Snell off the roster is if that Matt Canada, Jalen Samuels connection comes into play. Yeah, I'm with you. Please let this be the year that Jalen Samuels' experiment is done. I think if Colbert is looking at this long term, you kind of do the asset management. I believe Samuels is in the final year of his contract. Benny Snell has 2 years left, including this year. So simple asset management. Like if they're close, you keep the guy with more control. I don't want to see Benny go anywhere. I think he obviously has lost his short yardage role and his goal line role. But I think he's a valuable guy to have in the backfield just from an experience standpoint, because you're going to have a guy who hasn't played an NFL snap yet, Najee Harris. And then you have Anthony McFarland, who I think he had, less than 20 touches last season. So you need some experience back there. Obviously, Ballage brings that as well. But Benny Snell knows the guys around him. He kind of knows the system at this point. I don't see him as a veteran cut candidate. I'd rather see Jalen Samuels' name there at this point.
You know, I don't know if just the addition of the shiny new object and Kalen Ballage is kind of what has kind of created this talk. But, man, Mike Tomlin comes off as a huge Benny Snell guy. Man, that's Benny Snell football. You know, you just got, and look, it's not like Benny Snell can help you on special teams, too. And I know Kalen Ballage is okay on special teams. But given what I've seen so far, given my druthers just on special team stuff alone, man, give me Benny Snell. And look, Kalen Ballage might have a little bit of the upside maybe in short yardage situations, but man, why that's Najee Harris, man. Why the hell you want Kalen Ballage out there type situation? Let's face it, if this team loses Najee Harris for whatever reason, I mean, you might as well just roll up the sidewalks anyway. At that point there. So I don't get it. And look, not when it comes to back of the end, kind of bottom of the depth chart, running backs on a depth chart and all like that, and potential of making a 53-man roster. I'm not going to say that, oh man, it's Benny Snell's a guaranteed to make it. No, I'm not that foolish there. But I got to be honest, if Benny Snell stays healthy right now, I will be a little bit shocked if he doesn't make the 53. And I don't see how he has all of a sudden become this slam dunk kind of, guy that you think could potentially be a veteran that not make the roster from where I sit here today.
Yeah, and just like you mentioned, Tomlin's in his corner. You have Danny Smith, who's I'm sure going to pound the table for him. Danny Smith says his opinion doesn't really matter, but it does. It counts. Yeah, it counts does. When it comes to cut down day. And he's going to want Benny Snell on the roster for special teams. I think this was simply a case of, we have the shiny new toy, Najee Harris. Benny Snell's kind of irrelevant strictly as a running back now. And I think it was ESPN, and they just completely overlooked the fact that Benny Snell can contribute on special teams. And you need a similar back to Najee Harris as a depth piece in case, that shiny new toy breaks.
I mean, I understand why they brought in Kalen Ballage, but I mean, here we are kind of singing his praise. I mean, this kid's bounced around a lot. Look, I was a guy that I think even way back when he came out of Arizona State, I mocked him at some point, to the Steelers in one of those rounds, thinking maybe that could be a guy that they have interest in, and those kind of things. But I mean, he's yet to stick in any aspect just yet, and I think something's got to happen for things to go in his favor for him to, an injury or something along those lines for Kalen Ballage to make it. Now look, could he land on the practice squad? I think there's a good possibility of that. I think you're going to have a lot of guys that have a little bit of NFL experience, especially if they go to kind of the 16-man practice squad again this year. Could potentially land on the practice squad there. So that's where I'm at on this. I'll be a little bit shocked if Benny Snell does not make the 53-man roster there. All right, moving forward here. Selection of cornerback Artie Burns in the first round deemed the Steelers' biggest mistake of the past 5 years. I mean, look, you look at that right off the cuff there. I mean, it's a good dart to throw there, I think. Is that or was that the biggest mistake the Steelers have made in the past 5 years?
Oh, and you go first. You're the cornerback expert.
Yeah, I'm trying to like really jog my memory of like every bad pick they've made. It would certainly have to be up there because I think, again, it was coming out. It was just one of those. I think it's the team's so good at evaluating receivers in a way that other teams aren't, where it's what does Kevin Colbert always look for? He looks for the guys who can separate and the guys who can create after the catch, for the most part. I mean, that's really what he looks for. And I think I have so many Patriots fans that'll complain that, like, oh, we only look for those, like, combative catch guys. I think in the same rate, when the Steelers first transitioned to looking for those bigger corners, that's all they were looking for was a big corner with, like, large frame. You look at Artie Burns coming out of college, his hips were like so stiff to the point where like he's one of the stiffer cornerback prospects I've watched in the past like 5 years. There's some bigger guys too, Stanley Jean Baptist, a couple others, Lamar Jackson this year coming out of Nebraska. But like, again, these are mid-round guys. I think at the time it was a very maligned pick. A lot of people were looking at, I mean, he had the ball skills, but it just didn't ever like look like he was going to be a confident number one prospect. I think, I mean, obviously.
What was it the biggest mistake, though? I guess is the main question there. Can you name a bigger mistake than that in the last 5 years by the Steelers?
Is it just drafting, or is
it's just a biggest mistake? Period. Is it the biggest mistake in the last 5 years? I mean, it's up there. I mean, it's definitely. I mean, without a doubt, there's people nodding their head listening to this right now, saying, "Hell yeah, it is." But can you come up with it with a bigger mistake? I guess.
The only other one that could be in the conversation for me, I mean, strictly from a draft perspective, I know it's not just related to draft, but the only other one that could be in the conversation would be Terrell Edmonds, and I don't think that's entirely fair. I mean, both didn't have their 50-year options picked up. Edmonds was a long-term starter. Artie Burns lost his role. I'm struggling to think what could be even up there overall.
What about playing Sean Spence over L.J. Fort a couple years after Ryan Shazier? I mean, that's one of those things that you just don't know. But I mean, I know at the time that was a real big hot topic with me and David Todd and as well too, because I think L.J. Fort came off that game against the Ravens where, man, he was just kind of lights out there, and they had brought Sean Spence off the street, and then you had Arthur Moats. Is he outside linebacker? Is he going to play inside? Those kind of things. I don't know if that would have made a difference in that playoff game or not. But boy, looking back in the rearview mirror, I sure would like to see that game played over again with L.J. Fort manning the middle of that. Once again, I don't know if that's going to qualify as the biggest mistake. But I mean, let's face the facts here. This team struggled in when they have made the playoffs the last several years, and makes you kind of wonder if that team a few years ago there, had they won the game they were supposed to win against Jacksonville, I think, at that time, what would have happened from there? So that would be my submission into it. Boy, a lot has happened with this team over the span of 5 years. I get why maybe Artie Burns falls into that equation there, but that would be maybe my choice is maybe one of these things in the last 5 years, the biggest mistake by the franchise.
Yeah, that's a good one. That is a really tough question though. Like
it's a
racking
good
my
question
brain here. Yeah, I'm trying to find what other mistakes they might have had, but can I throw in maybe letting Todd Haley go? I mean,
look, I get criticized a lot for kind of sticking with offensive coordinators over the years and not being overly critical of them. I told people at the time, that things were probably going to go south with Todd Haley, that the split was probably going to happen, that Ben and Todd Haley had probably had enough of each other, yada yada. But I'm not so sure that was a, I understand why it was made. I understand, look, offensive coordinators have a shelf life, like it or not, with their systems and all like that, especially if they're not able to adapt and those things. But I don't know. But you can make an argument that at the time that wasn't a great move. Now looking back.
Yeah, I'm really struggling. I mean, a couple other things that come to mind: not hiring quarterbacks coach, staying within the organization when they promoted Fietner. I don't know. The Spence one is really good though, because who knows how that game would have gone if LJ Fort was on the field and not Sean Spence. I mean, aside from seeing him just get turned around and run over in that game, the only thing I have of Sean Spence is the just gruesome knee injury he had, and it was just a miracle he could even play after that. That's a good one though, Dave. That's a very good one. Man.
All right, why don't we take this opportunity and to insert the Joel Corey interview into this podcast right now, and then we'll come back on the backside here, and we won't discuss that because neither of you guys will have heard that. But until you listen to this back, we'll try some creative way to come on the backside, maybe discuss one more topic, and then get to a few emails here. So here's my interview with former NFL agent Joel Corey, currently of CBS Sports, and you can make sure you follow him on Twitter as well too there. And so here's that. Okay, welcome back to the Terrible Podcast, and as promised, pleased to have back on the show once again one of my favorites, obviously talking about cap and CBA and contracts. Everybody knows how big I am into the minutia and all things related to that. I wouldn't know half of what I know about those topics today if not for our next guest. I think this is like his third or fourth appearance on the Terrible Podcast. I am obviously talking about former NFL agent, current CBS Sports contributor, and he also runs a podcast, Inside the Cap, talking about Joel Corey. Joel, welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Thanks for having me.
Certainly. It's our pleasure. If there was a Joel Corey fathead, I would have one purchased and up on my wall. That's how high of.
Well, which Joel Corey would it be? Would it be the bodybuilding DJ from England who makes electronic dance music?
No, I wouldn't even know who that Joel Corey is if you wouldn't have brought that up. I might have to Google that one there. But
he's the reason my Twitter handle is last name first name as opposed to first name last name. I don't have common first or last names, but when I signed up for Twitter years ago, I'm like, why can't I get my name the way I want it? And that's because of that guy.
I hear you. So if anybody, just make sure we get it out there out front. If you want to follow this Joel Corey on Twitter, it's at Corey Joel, CORRYJOEL. So make sure you're following him there. Joel, I got a lot of great topics looking forward to getting your insight on today. And first and foremost, I wanted to start off with David Castro. The Steelers recently terminated his contract. They gave him the non-football injury designation, which you really don't see a lot of. It was a little bit of a shock, I think, overall. But my main question when it comes to this is, DeCastro has evidently had some ankle problems over the years, and you would think that at the end of the 2020 season, he would have had to pass some sort of physical, exit physical, and then you get into this off season and come to find out he needs bone spurs, in his ankle dealt with and all like that. Are you expecting DeCastro to file a grievance here against the Steelers? And I guess I'm just kind of perplexed overall. How can they get away with really this non-football injury designation as part of his termination?
Yeah, this one seems a little curious, given some of the comments DeCastro has made, that it seemed like it was bone spurs in his ankle and it was nagging him all season. So one, I don't know how he wasn't there wasn't a notation weekly when you're reporting injuries for the injury report. That's a different issue. And two, he's a longtime vet. I can't imagine he signed something stating that there wasn't an issue with his ankle in the exit physical. And based on those two factors, which I presume that he didn't, there's some notation. It seems like it would be hard for the Steelers to claim this is a non-football injury because it seems to be relating to the 2020 season. Now, that being said, if it relates to the 2020 season, then it wouldn't be considered a Juwan James type thing where he was working healthy, working out on his own away from the facility, then gets hurt, which is a classic non-football injury situation. This would seem to be the type of thing where you would potentially have an injury protection claim under the CBA, where if you are injured in the prior year and you're unable to play the next year and you have remaining years on your contract, then the first season after injury, if you can't play, you are entitled to 100% of your base salary capped at $2 million. So that would be what DeCastro's claim would be over, assuming he can't play. If he could play, if he can have surgery and can play, then signs with another team, passes the physical, he wouldn't have an injury protection claim. But it just seems very curious to me that this is being classified as a non-football injury, unless there's something I'm missing here. There's other information which isn't publicly available. But based on what DeCastro said, it seems like this is an injury relating to the 2020 season.
When you look at this, though, what option? Obviously he had no more guaranteed money left on his 1 year of contract in 2021. So technically, be performance or whatever. The Steelers could have technically just terminated a contract, almost like they did with Steven Nelson, and just sent him on his way that way. Especially if he didn't decide like he wanted to retire the way Marquise Pouncey did. What is the significance? I guess my question is if he was injured or couldn't pass some sort of physical, the Steelers just couldn't have terminated his contract without giving him some sort of designation like the non-football injury. Is that correct?
Well, the non-football injury designation suggests that there was an injury unrelated to his performance on the field that occurred at some point after the season ended for the Steelers. So from what I've read, that he said it's bone spurs and he was treating it conservatively through rest. Then when he tried to do something, that maybe that's it. When he tried to do something, there was a problem and he found out he needed surgery, and that's why the Steelers were taking the position it's non-football injury. But to me, this seems to relate to the 2020 season. So you can always cut somebody who got hurt in the previous year, and if they go ahead and sign a new contract, no harm, no foul. But if they have remaining years on the contract and they're not able to play football that first year out, then you have potential injury protection claim under the CBA, because we saw that In Seattle with Doug Baldwin, he had an injury from that last year that he played football, then got cut. He filed for injury protection, got paid under that benefit. So that would be where it would seem to me from the outside looking in where Castro would potentially have a claim. It wouldn't be for the whole $8.5 million because he would never be in a position to make his full base salary. I should say $8.75 million to make his full base salary, which is unguaranteed when he's getting released.
All right, so if he was to file a grievance and win it, odds of him getting the full million are slim, though, right?
No, he wouldn't be filing a grievance for the $8.75 million. Because to me, from what he said, it seems like this is a related 2020 injury, so this really should be an injury protection claim.
Okay.
If he has a claim, it's probably an injury protection claim. And there, if he can't play football, couldn't pass a physical, he's entitled to a max of $2 million.
Gotcha. All right, moving forward, Devin Bush, unfortunately, are back in the news this week. Really sort of some erratic kind of social media activity, really something we haven't seen out of him since he entered the NFL. He kind of, I don't know if he was joking on Twitter or was serious or not, talking about, basically got a fine. He did not say it came from the organization, if it was maybe kind of a swear jar type fine along those lines. It got me kind of wondering here, how far could the Steelers go with social media activity? Could they indeed fine a player? Do you see provisions in contracts related to social media or basically conduct detrimental to the team? What avenues would the Steelers have when it comes to, say, fining a player for social media activity?
Well, it depends on what their club policies and their fine schedule are, and they have to post those each year. One thing you do see in contracts and the addendums for teams where there are salary guarantees, one of the reasons you can void salary guarantees is if you make disparaging comments about the team or which undermines the public's confidence or respect for the team or seems to suggest there isn't loyalty from the player. Sometimes there's a written warning first before voiding happens, but that has been put in some contracts for some teams, or it can be grounds to void some guarantees. But fine schedules have to be clearly posted each year and be disseminated to players. So this does seem like an unusual situation where you're starting to monitor social media and fine people. You did have a guy who no longer plays with the team that's had gone on to have issues elsewhere that did get in a little bit of hot water during a playoff game for posting video on Facebook, I believe, like 3-4 years ago. And I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So maybe that's where this all stems from, that there's less of a tolerance here because of something a previous player has done.
Okay. All right. That clears that up. Speaking of contracts, TJ Watt more than likely will sign a very, very lucrative contract extension between now and the start of the 2021 regular season. Will he become the highest paid defensive player in the NFL at, say, around $28 million? I think there's a very good chance of that happening. I think you would agree with that as well, too. When you look at maybe a framework and maybe specifically a guy like, I don't know, Bosa, who I think right now around 27 million new money average. Let's say TJ Watt does get a new money average of 28 million. He's currently has, I think, old money on the table of a little bit over 10 million based on the Steelers picking up his 5th-year option and all like that. I kind of think that maybe this will be a 5-year extension, totaling this thing out maybe 6 years, $150 million or thereabouts. What do you kind of, A, do you kind of agree with that framework? And B, I think if you look at the cash flow, and this is the minutia where I lose a lot of my listeners because I love this stuff. When you look at cash flow, I think Bosa had somewhere along the lines of, I think, 43 million in the first year and then escalate from there. What do you see kind of maybe as a first year cash flow in 2021 for Watt, and maybe what his cash flow maybe looks like in the first 3 years?
Well, you had multiple questions there, so I'm going to start
right.
with your first one. If we're talking $28 million per year on the new money average and contracts for veteran players who have years remaining, the negotiation is over the new money and how many new years you're going to add. What you have remaining on the deal is what you have. If you're talking $28 million per year is the average, to me, there's not a deal to be made because that's low. Now, the reason I'm saying that is, yes, Bosa is the highest paid, Joey, that is, highest paid defensive player, new money average of $27 million per year. Highest paid non-quarterback is DeAndre Hopkins at $27.25 million per year. I'm looking at, okay, however the increases have gone. Last year, Myles Garrett signed before Bosa became the first $25 million per year non-quarterback. It was a 6.4% increase over Khalil Mack's deal, which had been the highest paid non-quarterback at $23.5 million per year. Then Bosa comes in, 8% increase over Garrett. So if you're talking going just from 28 to 27 in terms of defensive players, that's a 3.7% increase. I'm not interested in that if I am TJ Watt's agent, Tom Condon from CAA, who represents his brother. So you're going to have to get me closer to $30 million. And then I'm going to ask for $30 million for a different reason. That'd be about a 10% increase over DeAndre Hopkins, 11% over Bosa. But the Steelers are one of 3 teams in the NFL who do not have guaranteed money outside of a signing bonus.
Right.
The Bengals, Packers, and Steelers are the 3 teams. Now, Packers have made one exception. Aaron Rodgers has traditional guarantees. Bengals have made no exceptions. The Steelers have made one exception with Ben Roethlisberger. He had injury guarantees, didn't have skill and cap guarantees. None of his base salaries were fully guaranteed. Now, the substitute is they have March roster bonuses, 3rd or 5th day of the league year roster bonuses in the 2nd and 3rd contract year. Now, you're going to have to give me the biggest signing bonus ever for a non-quarterback because my guarantees aren't going to be commensurate with Bosa's or Garrett's. Now, Bosa, $102 million overall guarantee, $78 million fully guaranteed at signing. Garrett, $100 million overall guarantees, $50 million fully guaranteed at signing. You know, because of this structure, you're not going to have the type of guarantees these guys have. So you're going to have to give me a better cash flow, and you have to give me a huge signing bonus to compensate unless you're willing to set a new contractual precedent, which teams fight tooth and nail against, and give me traditional guarantees with this deal, and then I'm going to be more accommodating. And because I'm going to have to take a structure which isn't like theirs, I want a higher average. So that's where the whole $30 million comes in. I don't think it gets to 30, but that would be the ask. So to me, I've seen people prognosticate, you can have like 67, 70 million guarantees. I'm like, that ain't happening in Pittsburgh unless they deviate from what they do. Now, the biggest signing bonus ever for a non-quarterback is Aaron Donald's $40 million. So to me, you got to exceed that. Watt's supposed to play currently on his 5th-year option of $10.089 million. If you gave him a $45 million signing bonus, I'm not saying they're going to do this, and you lowered his base salary to $1.089 million, cap number does not change from the 5th-year option, which is currently at $10.089 million, because the $45 million signing bonus gets prorated over 5 years, $9 million on the cap in 2021, and then the $1.089 million base salary you chopped it down to. When you talk about Bosa having 43 and some change in first-year compensation, part of that signing bonus was deferred. I forget how much, but part of it was deferred. So he's not technically making $43 million in the first year, but that's how much his signing bonuses, for the most part, get deferred. So I would assume if Watt got the $40 million signing bonus, it wouldn't be $46.089 million he's making, because there'd be some deferral of the signing bonus. Largest signing bonus Steelers have ever given, to a veteran, Ben Roethlisberger, 2019, $37.5 million signing bonus in his last extension that he signed.
All right, so you could really see potentially Bosa getting, say, a $45 million signing bonus, a first-year base salary of $1.089, technically right around $46 million first year 2021 money there. What do you see kind of his cash flow schedule being after year 2 and year 3 then, based kind of loosely on those numbers?
Well, it's got to be exaggerated just because they have traditional guarantees and I don't. So one thing I'm going to want is everything, and the Steelers haven't done this before. They've done part of the money in a March roster bonus, but not everything but minimum salaries. I'm going to want everything but minimum salaries in the roster bonus. So the third day, my money's vested. Payment schedule might be a little bit different. But that's really gonna how I'm gonna want it. In terms of one thing agents will look at is first 3 New Years, and Bosa's first 3 New Years, he's at 87.64 million. So you're gonna be, to me, first 3 New Years, that would be through 2024. The new money is gonna have to be, to me, at least 90 million. And you add in, that would be through the first 4 years. You add in the option year, the money you already had, then you're probably going to have cash of about $100 million over those first 4 years.
All right, good deal. That is a good framework there. I'm with you. I think somewhere between 28 to 30 million, and it'd be nice if they could get this done and his cap numbers stay the same, which makes a lot of sense the way you laid out there with the $45 million signing bonus, 1.089 base salary. That leaves his cap charge at 10.089 for 2021. I appreciate that. What a lot of people.
Well, and I'm not saying they're going to do that.
Right.
I'm saying if I'm the agent, where I'm kind of steering this thing. That look, I'm not getting traditional guarantees.
Right.
So you have to accommodate me in some way, shape, or form because I have to accept your lousy structure that
Right.
only 3 teams do. And if I have to accept your lousy structure, you got to give me something I can hang my hat on, and that would have to be the signing bonus.
Gotcha. And it would really be a shock if the Steelers veered off of that for non-quarterbacks. So it would really kind of be monumental and kind of a shift organizational-wise if they did that. So do you think they will get him done by week 1?
It would be smart to
Right.
get him done because the longer you
the
wait
meter's running
with a great player, and we saw with a good player what happened in Dallas, that the longer they waited, the more it cost. I know you could stick a franchise tag on TJ Watt, but let's say you don't get it done and you go that route, you franchise him next year. Yeah, I'm waiting for Nick Bosa to get done. I'm assuming Nick Bosa is going to come back and play like he did as a rookie before he tore the ACL. And the 49ers are proactive and get deals done. And I know you'd have the July 15th deadline next year to worry about for franchise players signing long-term deals. But I'm waiting as long as possible, hoping Nick Bosa becomes the first $30 million per year non-quarterback, and then I'm going to ask for more than what he gets. So waiting for a great player, and I put TJ Watt in the great player category, is something you shouldn't do just because it's going to cost you more money in the long run. They have cap room right now, and they're in a good cap situation next year,
right.
Especially since you're not going to have a high-priced quarterback in all likelihood because I'm assuming Roethlisberger retires. This hasn't been a team which has gone on spending sprees in free agency. So odds are you're going to have, at best, a moderately priced quarterback. You won't have anyone – you won't have to contend with the highest-paid non-quarterback potentially and a high-priced quarterback as well. So that's another thing which cuts in favor of paying T.J. Watt sooner rather than later.
Gotcha. All right. A lot of people peel back the curtain here. A lot of people will see X player makes this amount of money, even for like a rookie this year, a little more than $650,000. They see that and they go, wow, that's a lot of money. What kind of player expenses are involved? What's typically, how much does an agent kind of get out of that? And obviously there's taxes that the player has to pay on that money, and then whatever upkeep they have for training and all like that. Peel back the curtain on sort of expenses that players have.
Well, I used to kind of chuckle the first time an incoming player would get paid, just if they've never had a real job before. They're like, "What's this FICA stuff?" If they had a pay stub. So I would always joke that, well, get used to your favorite uncle because Sam's going to be around for the rest of your life. Now, the league minimum salary for an incoming player is $660. All rookies have a base salary of $660, depending upon $606,000. That is, depending upon where you're drafted, will determine your signing bonus. So, for someone like Trevor Lawrence, he's got a $24.1 million signing bonus as the first overall pick. And where you play will also determine things. He was fortunate to be drafted by a team which has no state income tax.
Right.
So that's much different than playing in California. If you play in California, highest state income tax rate in the country, high income earners, 13.3%. So your net income in Florida or Tennessee or Texas or Washington, all states no state income tax, your net income is much different than it is in a state like California. One thing that you try to do for players, to the extent they allow you to, is put them on a budget and get them to stick to it because you're monitoring their statements and what they're spending monthly. Grown people don't like to be told or have anyone scrutinize their spending habits. But that's one thing you try to do as an agent. One thing, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. So when you were not an NFL player, you lived on a shoestring budget. So you try to keep the player to spending more like the average person to the extent possible. Obviously, there are going to be big purchases, like maybe there's going to be a car, maybe you do something for your parents. You don't necessarily buy something in the city where your first contract is because you don't know if you're going to be there long term. So you're trying to eliminate huge expenditures. You want to keep the hanger-ons, the extended family from coming out the woodwork asking the player for money. So to the extent you are more than just a contract negotiator and you are involved in other aspects of the player's career and life, you can do those types of things.
Gotcha. Voidable years is something that we saw a lot of, especially in the Steelers case here. And it's very understandable, having the decrease in the cap number due to the COVID fallout and all along those lines. I mean, we see quite a few players, Roethlisberger, Juju, 2 or 3 more, Eric Ebron. Is this going to be considered? What is the biggest negative fallout? Obviously, other than, well, you got a big dead money can in that following year. There is there any other really negative things associated with the voidable years, and is this mechanism even post COVID and assuming things get back on track with cap escalation? Is this the new hot thing that we're going to see more of here with voidable years, or is this going to be specifically something we look back to 2021?
For most teams, I think it's going to be a 2021 thing. No one was anticipating a global pandemic where the cap was going to drop $15.7 million. Cap planning is done typically in 3-year snapshots, and you're assuming the cap was going to go up the traditional 6 to 8%. Teams are planning conservatively for like a $205 million cap, and now you're at 182.5. So in order to accommodate a roster where you're not having to make drastic changes, you saw teams like the Steelers who've never done the voidable years, like in Roethlisberger's case, they added 4 dummy years, which will void sometime in next February. They're going to have a $10.34 million cap hit, assuming he retires, for stretching out the proration over 5 years from the signing bonus as opposed to 1. Same with Juju. It's a 1-year deal, but the signing bonus is prorated over 5 years. So they're going to have $5.6 million of dead money if he signs elsewhere, or they don't do an extension before the void date hits. Some teams like the Saints, that's just a matter of course because they're more aggressive in how they manage the cap. They've been sticking voidable years in contracts for several years. The last couple of Drew Brees contracts have had voidable years. teams which have been in salary cap hell, so to speak, or had huge salary cap issues, like the Raiders, started doing the adding voidable years to like Richard Seymour's contract back in 2012. But I think you're going to see it used a lot less on a go-forward basis because with the new TV deals, the salary cap is expected to explode most likely beginning in 2024. Once you've paid back the money for the cap being higher than it would have been if you had all the losses sustained in 2020 taken in 2021. The salary cap ceiling was set for a reason. I suspect we're going to be close to the $208.2 million, if not there. And if that's the case, that's a 14.1% increase over where we are now. So there should be less of a need for teams to use the voiding dummy years in 2022. So I think 2021 is kind of a special case in terms of teams which have never done it before doing it. So I think those teams may go back to how the business was prior to the pandemic and the cap drop for 2021. But the teams like the Saints, they've been doing it for years. They're not going to deviate. That's going to be part of their standard operating procedure.
You kind of touched on my next question there, the 2022 salary cap ceiling being set at $208.2 million, I believe. You firmly believe, what kind of chance do you think of it actually coming in at the ceiling number? And then on top of that, how much do you expect the cap to kind of rise annually as the new TV money kind of kicks in and from, I think you said kind of really escalating in like 2024. What do you kind of see the progression in the cap number, from 2022 to 2024 league wide?
Well, I'm operating under the assumption it's going to be at the ceiling for 2022. Teams have to plan conservatively, so they may be thinking, at least on their internal projections, if it gets back to where it was in 2019, great. Here's a team you can't go, hey, we think the cap's going to go up as much as it should, and then it doesn't. Your planning is all messed up where you're going to have to start releasing people, so you err on the side of caution as a team. Now, you still have to pay back the money which kept the cap from dropping, from what some people have told me, down to what would have been like in the 130 millions, which that would have been unworkable for the league. So you got to pay that back first. So it's probably going to be 2024 before you see the huge increases. The question is, are they going to phase the new TV money in like they did for the last CBA gradually, or is it going to be like it was in the previous years, or is a big spike one year and then you have very nominal increases after that? That I don't know how they're going to handle it. But that's why you saw a guy like Leonard Williams do a 3-year deal this year, so he can try to get another bite of the apple. So I would not, if I'm a young enough guy where I think coming off of a rookie contract or if I'm about to sign a veteran contract, I don't want to do a 5-6 year deal. I want to do a 3-year deal, give up 3 new years max, so I can potentially get another bite of the apple. Because timing of coming up, particularly after you've signed your first veteran contract, can be important depending upon your position, because that will determine whether you do get a chance to get another huge lucrative contract if you're playing at a very high level.
Gotcha. Well, Joel, I certainly do appreciate it. CBS Sports, you can make sure you read his column, at least one post a week, I think, on CBSSports.com. I'll have the link of that in the post as well. Make sure you're following Joel on Twitter at Corey Joel. He also has a great pie. If you're into the cap and CBA and all that minutia that I am into, you should be listening to that podcast. You can subscribe to that feed anywhere probably where you listen to podcasts. And you also do work with Sports Management Worldwide. Joel, why don't you tell people a little bit about that?
Sports Management Worldwide is a educational, it's a company which offers sports based educational classes for a variety of topics, where you have industry professionals who teach the class. There's a football scouting and GM class, which is taught by Mark Dominic, the former Tampa Bay Buccaneers GM. There's a football analytics class, which is taught by people from Pro Football Focus and also Football Outsiders. I have a couple of classes I teach. One is on the athlete representation, representing athletes, and the class which is taken up an inordinate amount of my time right now is I have a prep course for people who want to be certified by the NFLPA to be a contract advisor. Their test is the first Thursday in August this year. So it's this one's a prep course, which is kind of designed for like when you're taking a standardized test, whether it's the MCAT, SAT, LSAT. So I'm just trying to prepare people to pass the test. Their classes in baseball, Dan Evans, a former GM, teaches a couple of baseball classes. There are classes in basketball. So it runs the gamut of different sports with Sports Management Worldwide in terms of the classes available.
And I believe they can find more info on that at sportsmanagementworldwide.com. And Joel, man, you just don't know how much I appreciate all the little questions that I bother you with on Twitter. You're so kind to give me not only right answers and good answers, but timely answers on top of that. And that certainly does mean a lot to me. And you're going to hear a lot from a lot of people, I think, listening to this podcast as well, too, and hopefully thanking you for your time today. So, Joel, once again, thanks for coming in and being on the Terrible Podcast.
Hey, well, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
All right, and thanks once again to Joel Corry. Boy, I'm just ecstatic every time I get a chance to, even if it's just via direct message on Twitter. I just thrilled to death every time I get to talk to Joel Corry. Follow him on Twitter at Corry Joel. You can find that obviously that Twitter link in the post for this podcast. Hop on Twitter and send Joel a tweet and let him know you appreciate him coming on the Terrible Podcast. And boy, I get a lot of info from him throughout the season there, and you could not find a better resource than him. Make sure you're listening to his podcast. If you like cap and contracts and CBA talk and like to get into that kind of minutia, if you will, you are doing it wrong if you're not listening to his podcast. So guys, I won't have you weigh in on that because you obviously did not hear it. You'll hear it after the fact there, but always a good time having Joe Corry on to talk those kind of things there. All right, let's wrap it up kind of with this before we get to maybe an email or two here. Pro Football Focus predicts Chase Claypool will lead the Steelers in receiving yards in 2021. True or false?
True, and I think Owen touched on that earlier. He's going to be the deep shot guy. He could be in for just a monster year. Yeah, I think that's a good prediction from PFF. Yeah, hopefully Ben Roethlisberger gets the deep balls figured out, and Chase, finishes off some of those plays on the back end. Obviously he struggled last year at times finishing some of those plays, as Dave and Alex have pointed out in previous pods and posts. But I think Chase is the favorite and should be to lead the Steelers in receiving yards for sure.
Owen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say true. Actually, the way I see it setting up, I think it's going to be Deontay Johnson in receptions, Juju in touchdowns, Claypool in yards. But I could see Claypool take the touchdowns, too. I think that'll be close between those two.
I like that, yeah.
All right. Now, a lot of people are going to look back on this podcast probably, and they're going to say, Dave just got a couple more yes men in there. And nobody wants to challenge Dave on anything there. So risk your own firing here. No. What would be kind of maybe my hottest take or opinion or something maybe that you guys have heard or seen me tweet, anything in say the last 3 months or what would be the biggest disagreement maybe you would have with maybe a viewpoint I have been on the last, I don't know, couple months. I promise not to fire either one of you.
I mean, the easy one for me is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. We had that discussion on the draft pod. Obviously, it turned out in your favor. He was 52nd overall.
I miss, but I don't miss often.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think we had a disagreement on that.
And on the ones that I do miss, I make sure to sweep those well up underneath the carpet. Pretty good. I haven't done this since 2008 and been successful for a reason. I've learned to cover my tracks pretty well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I think it's JOK, and I think we disagreed a little bit on Freiermuth. But I mean, yeah, overall, there's not a lot of takes that you have when it comes to the Steelers and players and the scheme or whatever that I kind of disagree with, because I mentioned this at the top of the show. Like, I started listening to you guys 2010. I was a freshman in college, and that kind of helped shape how I viewed the game. And that's obviously carried over into me now working under you and writing for you and appearing on podcasts. There's not a ton that I, hear on podcasts, and I'm like, oh, that was crazy, Dave, or anything like that. You're not the hot takey guy. So it's hard to find something that you disagree with. I mean, we'll disagree on prospects here and there, but it's nothing major at this point.
You're on salary now, by the way, too. So it's not Christmas time either. So bonuses,
the bonus is not in the mail. You're telling me?
Yeah, I don't know about that. Owen, shoot your shot at me, man. Here I am.
Yeah, no, I think realistically, the biggest one I think we differ a little bit on Freiermuth. I think Freiermuth's a better blocker per se than, I think the 2020 tape definitely was not as good as the 2019 tape. I think a lot of that was injury influenced, but I think he's going to have a bigger rookie year role than you might think. I think you'll see him play a lot, especially in run game situations. And
I think I have him down for really even more snaps than Alex does. I think Alex is kind of maybe possibly downplaying him a little bit more than I am. I think there's a legitimate argument to be made for him to hit maybe and this is even without injuries, that he hits, let's say it's 1,000 regular season offensive snaps there. I think there's a legitimate argument potentially for him to get on the field for 500 snaps or so, and I don't think Alex is even close to being in that neighborhood there. Now I don't know about the receptions and I'll carry on.
Yeah, that's where I was going to get into it a little bit. I think I could easily see him be like a 40, 45, and then 5-6 touchdown kind of like rookie year. I think, especially in Canada's offense, I think he's just a nice seam threat in the red zone. Good jump ball guy, can definitely, box people out at the point of contact. And I think he allows you to change Ebron's role too, where you saw a little bit of Ebron as like a jet sweep guy in Indy, and I think that'd be an interesting thing for them to get him rolling on a little bit. I'd say probably the biggest thing I do agree on you with for the most part, and I always have, is the defensive net yards per passing attempt. Ever since I first heard that one, I've really been looking into it and studying that. It's definitely a proven track record. So.
Man, show me a better stat. Show me a better predictive stat. Let's say, obviously the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, there's not enough, there's not enough to work with there. But man, you get into week 7, week 8, week 9 of the season, show me a better predictive stat, especially on a defense. I think you could look at some arguments offensively and say, I don't know, let's look at the running game and how that mixes in there and all like that. But man, show me a better stat on the defensive side of the ball that's predictive after about week 7, week 8 of the season than adjusted net yards per passing attempt right now. I'm looking for it.
Yeah, and I think, Dave, you kind of in the last few years, I think it's late in the year, you'll take a screenshot of the league leaders and, in that stat, and you're like, chances are, the 2 teams in the Super Bowl are going to come from this. And,
right.
And it's been spot on. So it's like, it's, I remember when you first introduced it, I was like, that sounds like just another analytics stat that I'm going to forget about. But then year after year, it's like, no, this matters. It's very telling. And I wish more people bought into it.
You guys opened up the damn wormhole here. Damn you, Owen. Look, I think defensively that number has got to be under 6 in order for you to compete. And I think the 2021 Steelers I don't think the number is going to be 4 point whatever it was last year. I don't think it's going to be that low because I definitely think this defense is going to take a step backwards here. I do think it can be under 6, and I think it could be in that, I don't know, 5.7, 5.6 range or whatnot, which is should be more than good enough to allow the team, at least on that side, to be competitive and make a run at the Super Bowl, or some sort of playoff run. I don't want to throw Super Bowl out there just yet, but offensively, I think that can you win? I don't, and we said it earlier when we talked about Roethlisberger. I don't think you can expect Roethlisberger and the offense to carry a adjusted net yards per passing attempt number of 6.2, 6.3, 6.4 along those lines, and expect this team to be a legitimate team. Look, I think they can make the playoffs with a number like that, but if you're going to make any kind of run there, it's got to be higher than that. That's why I think a key number to look at in general when it comes to adjusted net yards per passing attempt is on with the Steelers after week 7, week 8. That number to me has got to be 6.8 or higher at least to get a good feeling of this team, and that's even if the running game is doing what they're supposed to be doing there. But man, show me a better stat as far as predictive midway through the season, man.
Yeah, the other stat that I wanted to point out, growing up, all you heard about and read about was yards per carry for running backs. That's how you judge them. That's how you judge team rushing attacks. But I remember when Dave first brought up run success rates, and I was like, what is this thing? And I found myself down a rabbit hole. Was it Football Outsiders? Was it the ones that introduced it?
Football Outsiders has definitely done some studies on it, but I mean, I think if you go back to some of the old Chase Stewart stuff on Pro Football Perspective, I think, or Football Perspective, obviously shoot off Pro Football Reference. Just Google him and go back and look at some. And look, the qualifications for success rates have kind of, it depends on really what you want to use. I think a good basis is 40% of a first down run. So in other words, if you're getting 4 yards or more, and I think even in an interview with Joe Thomas a few years ago, he was even talking about how NFL teams look at any run that's 4 yards or more as being successful. I think you can kind of drill it down there. Look, on second down, if it's second down and 8, you damn sure better have 4 yards or more. You better have 50% of the yardage needed. Now, obviously, if it's second and 12, which unfortunately we've seen the Steelers be in the situations far too many times over the last couple of years, it's kind of hard to expect a running back, if you run the football on second and long situations, to get 50% of the yards needed. That's why I think you mix in there that any run 6 yards or more by a running back should be deemed successful. I don't care if it's 3rd and 28. If a running back gets you 6 yards, that's a successful run. Whereas also I think it's a successful run if it's 2nd and 10. Those kind of things. And obviously, 3rd downs and 4th downs, whatever the yardage may be, especially if it's 3rd and 3 or shorter. If you're going to hand the football off to a running back and run the football, he damn sure better pick up. It better be a successful play. It better pick up the first down in either one of those situations there for it to be successful. So you can bet your sweet, I'm going to be tracking successful runs with Najee Harris in the fold 2021.
Yeah, I really got into, the successful run rate in the last few years, just with James Conner. Obviously he had the really good 2018, but then 2019 and a little bit of last year, I really was monitoring it because obviously the run game stunk. Like there's no way to get around that. But I wanted to see the successful run rates, and that's kind of what I started using in some Twitter beefs to back up James Conner at certain points. But I think it's a fantastic stat, and I wish more people would look at that compared to yards per carry when it comes to this is the best rushing attack or this is the best running back. Like yards per carry is kind of like average in baseball now. Like, it doesn't tell the full story.
Right. I mean, look, it was great when I was a kid in my underwear at 6 years old reading the box score.
Yep.
My old man used to get mad at me, those kind of things there. But it's an archaic stat now because, look, if you look back on it, man, if you have a running back that has a 50-something yard run in a game, that can heavily skew him not having successful runs early in the game. But yet all people will say is, look, he averaged more than 4 yards per carry. What do you want there? So anyway, plenty of time to discuss that. I got one good email here that I want to go over that I think is entertaining and a good way to kind of settle the or to close out this show here. All right, this one's from Paul Brown. I think Paul is a longtime Twitter follower as well too. Paul writes in, Dave and company, since there's multiple opinions for this podcast, I would like for you guys to settle a debate I had with a friend. Are you for or against adult men wearing a player's jersey? If not, what age is this no longer appropriate, and explain your stance? If so, is it also acceptable to wear the jersey of on a non-game day in a public setting? I won't tell you my stance, he says. I'll just hang up and listen. So let's talk about the whole the player jersey thing and adult men and fandom and all like that.
See, Owen, I'm getting to the point where, like, all the players are younger than me, so it's kind of like, do I get that? I love jerseys. I've loved them since I was 5 years old. I have way too many. Ask my wife. She's upset with the amount of jerseys that I have.
How many do you have, really? Seriously?
Football-wise, probably 40.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah. It's not just Steelers. I mean, like, I dabble in other teams, not because I'm fans of that team, but, like, I like the player. But I do not wear jerseys outside of game days or outside of football season.
Do you wear them outside of your house?
No, not unless I'm going to a game,
I just heard a giggle from my wife. I don't know what's going on, but
no,
she said, my wife says I have my own issues. So.
I don't wear them outside.
My wife want to let everybody know that I wear a uniform every day. So, and I do.
Go.
So
there you go.
Carry on.
No, I don't wear them outside unless I'm going to watch a game at somebody's house, or I'm going to the game, or I go to the bar on game day. I do have family members that in the past have worn a Steeler jersey to church. And, it's very common in Pittsburgh that happens on game days. Man, wear your jerseys. Do whatever. Live your life the way do whatever makes you happy. I just know what I do with jerseys, and yeah, it's cool. Wear another man's name on your back. You're a fan. It's fine to me.
Oh, and I think you're a little bit younger. Tell us what's cool with the kids these days.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, yeah, especially being like a college age kid, you definitely see people wearing, jerseys to like parties and stuff like that all the time. So I think that's one side of it. Especially growing up, I would always go to games with my dad, like Gillette Stadium, TD Garden, stuff like that, Celtics, Patriots games. And he would always he'd just have the hat on. And I'd always be like, oh, you don't have any jerseys, stuff like that. He'd be like, and he would have that take, oh, I'm not wearing a guy's jersey who's 20 years younger than me, all that kind of stuff. And it's weird for me because for the first time in my life, I'm getting to the age where guys who are drafted are younger than me. And yeah, from now, all the rookies are going to be younger. So I think at that point, I'll have a better evaluation of it. I agree with Josh. I think most game days, I'll be sitting in like my college common room with my friends. We'll all be wearing, the jerseys of our respective teams, watching the game or something like that. If I were to go to a game at Heinz Field, I would wear a jersey. So in those settings, I agree with Josh. Maybe bar full of Pittsburgh fans probably wear a jersey. I don't think most days I'm going to wake up and just say, hey, I'm going to throw on a jersey and just walk around in it. But I think they have they have their place, and I think the like, oh, you're wearing another grown man's name on your back thing is a little overplayed sometimes.
Do you own any jerseys, Steelers jerseys, Owen? And when's the last time you bought one?
So I have three. I have three.
Oh, that means he has 6.
I have three. I have Troy Polamalu from when I was a kid. That's the only one I can really still wear. I have a Le'Veon Bell jersey, and I have an Antonio Brown jersey. Neither of them born in 3 years at this point.
Yep.
But
were they gifts or did you buy them?
2 of them were gifts. I bought the Antonio Brown myself, and I regretted that purchase almost immediately after.
I tell you where I've never really been a big jersey kid. Because I think look, my wife would have shot me if I would have spent some of this. She would have. Let me rephrase that. She would have not missed when she shot me, like she has in the past. But literally, that that's a chunk of change, man. I think overall, and I other than getting them out of as Christmas gifts, as back when the Earth was cooling in the 70s, out of the Sears and Roebuck catalog, I never have really been a big jersey guy. Now, I don't look down. It's part of fandom, I think. There's different level of fandoms, and I understand the whole process of buying the jersey and supporting your favorite player and team and all. I gotta admit, most of all, now when I look at it, though, my analytical minutia side of it thinks, oh man, I can't believe they bought a so-and-so jersey in another 3 years. That guy's gonna be gone. Yep.
Yep.
That's the way that I more look at them now, and I personally, I think, and this is just me, if you're going to buy a jersey at any point, I would be more apt, or if I was going to buy a jersey at this point, I would be more apt to buy a jersey of a Hall of Famer or somebody that's done playing, that has the legacy that, man, I could wear this jersey for the next 30 years and nobody would even bat an eye at. That's kind of where I am at in the whole jersey thing. And look, fandom's fandom. I'm not going to criticize. It's a cop out, but it kind of goes back to what Josh said. Man, if it makes you happy to show up a game day with a Najee Harris or a Ben Roethlisberger or a T.J. Watt or whoever jersey, man, have at it. If that's the way you want to spend your money to show your fandom, have at it. Now, as far as merchandise and apparel goes over the years, it's mostly been hats with me. But even then, I've never been a huge kind of hat, Steelers, buyer in that sense, of merchandise and things along those lines there. So, any other final thoughts on merchandise or jerseys or anything for Paul Brown?
I think with the jerseys, it really depends on just the demographic. I grew up, and and I think you're close to my age. There's probably only 6 years separated. So, when I grew up, you had the MTV music videos and the rappers and all that. They always wore jerseys. So you were like, that's what's cool, and now it's like, I don't want to go to the grocery store in a jersey. I don't know. It was a normal way of life for me. I'm going to go to school today. I'm going to wear a Jerome Bettis jersey, even if it's April, it was just normal. But it will never not be hilarious to see people walking into church in their Sunday best in the middle of football season, and there's a Joe Green or a Jack Lambert jersey, walking up the steps. That's just the way of life. But it's always interesting to see the people that, middle of summer, they're out there with a black Jack Lambert jersey in 100-degree weather. So,
all right, we've officially tried to string this out. As I think we got about an hour and 42 minutes or so with you guys, and obviously however long the Joel Corey interview is. So I think we filled up people's weekends here. Boy, it's like you guys have always been on the podcast. I think you guys do a great job of just fitting in. Appreciate you guys sitting in for Alex. I'm sure we'll have both of you guys on, maybe together, maybe individually, along with the rest of the Steelers Depot contributors here prior to the regular season starts. I appreciate you guys once again, Josh and Owen. Josh, put your Twitter handle out there. Owen, put your Twitter handle out there.
Yep, I am at by Josh Carney.
Yeah, you can find me at Owen Straley 21.
All right, I appreciate you guys. You guys do awesome work. Appreciate the contributions to the site. So with that, Alex should be back with me, I think, on Tuesday there. In the meantime, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.